Today's lesson is on unit rates with fractions. So as a reminder, unit rates are representative of 1. So if I'm going 60 miles per hour, that's a unit rate because it's the number of miles I can travel in one of those hours. And today, we're working specifically with fractions, which is a little different because now we're going to be looking at parts of a number. Remember, you don't have to copy the main idea. This is just something you watch for context. So our first main idea, how do we get fractions to 1? If it takes me 2 hours to paint a third of a room, how long is it going to take me to paint a full room or one room? I always like using a table to help me set up this ratio. So it took 2 hours to paint a third of a room, and I need to get that room to be 1. The way that I get a number to 1 is I could either divide by that number, dividing by 1/3, or I could multiply its reciprocal, which is 3/1, which makes sense. If we have our room separated into thirds, and each of those thirds take 2 hours, then what I'm doing is taking that 2 and I'm multiplying it by 3. So a third of a room is in 2 hours, so 3 times that amount gives me the whole room, which gives me 6 hours. It's not always going to be exactly 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/6 because those are much easier to solve. So this time, if it takes me 2 hours to paint 2/3 of a room, because I've gotten better at painting, how long would it take me to paint the full room? I set up my table showing my ratio of 2 hours for 2/3 of a room. And since this one we can't just multiply by 3, what we're going to do is I could either divide by 2/3 because that's how we get something to 1, or since we already know we're going to have to multiply the reciprocal, I multiply by 3 halves. So when I multiply the 2/3 by 3 halves, I want you to watch what happens. I end up with 6/6, which is 1. So this gives me one of the rooms. Since I multiplied 3 halves on the right side of my table, I multiply 3 halves on the left side as well. And that gives me 6 halves, which is 3 hours. Because I don't want you to be memorizers of math, I want you to be problem solvers. I want to show you another way you could have solved this. You could get rid of the denominator by multiplying by 3, and that gives me 6 hours I could complete, and the 3's cancel to give me 2 rooms. Then I want to get that 2 to a 1, and I could divide by 2, and I still get 3 hours for 1 room, just like I did before. Here's the first example. Now, when you're copying it into your notes, because remember, we have to copy our examples, you could just simplify this to the minimum of what you're going to be able to use as a resource. You don't want to simplify it so far that you don't know what the original problem was, but you do want to simplify it so that you're not writing full paragraphs. So Mike read a third of a paper in a fourth of an hour. How long would it take him to read the full paper? So what I've highlighted, I think, is a good minimum to copy down. Let's make our table. He read a third of a paper in a fourth of an hour. We want to get to the full paper. Now, one of the benefits of writing it in a table is I know which side to put the 1 on. See, in our examples, we were putting, or in our main idea, we were putting the 1 under hours. But instead, he's going to read the full paper, or one whole paper. So the number we're trying to get to 1 is the 1/3. I multiply by 3, and a third times 3 gives me 3/3, which is the 1 that I got. And if I multiplied by 3 on the left, I have to multiply by 3 on the right, and that gives me 3/4 of an hour. Some kids, when we work with fractions of an hour, prefer to write it in terms of minutes. So if the question doesn't specify if it's going to be hours or minutes, you get the choice, either 3/4 of an hour or 45 minutes. For example 2, it took Janetta 1/6 of an hour to choreograph 1.5 minutes of a song. If she had used the full hour, how many minutes of choreography could she have completed? So let's set this up in a table to start. Now I've highlighted what I think is important to copy into your notes so that you have a reference for how we're solving it. And then I've put my information into a table. Now it could get a little confusing because we have hours and we have minutes, and sometimes you're gonna have to convert hours to minutes and things like that. But we need to look at what we're comparing. We're comparing the hours it takes to choreograph to the song length. And my ratio is 1/6 to 1.5. Now, if she had used the full hour, so 1 whole hour, how much of the song could she have completed? To get from 1/6 to 1, we are going to multiply by 6. That means I multiply my other side by 6 as well. When I go to multiply 1.5 by 6, I need improper fractions, so 3 halves multiplied by 6/1 gives me 18 halves, which is 9 minutes of a song. You don't need to copy the you try. You just need to try them on your own and then play and check your answer. Ready? Taylor read 1/6 of a novel in 2/3 of an hour. How long would it take her to read the whole novel? So if it's 1/6 of the novel, to get to 1 whole novel, I have to multiply by 6. That gives me 2/3 multiplied by 6/1, which is 12/3, which is 4 hours. For the turtle walking 1/8 of a mile in 3/8 of an hour, what's his speed in miles per hour? So that means hours is what we're trying to get to 1. So I set up my table and I'm comparing miles to hours. The turtle walked 1/8 of a mile in 3/8 of an hour. And remember, we're going to per hour, so we need 1 hour. So what I'm going to do is figure out how to get 3/8 to 1. To get 3/8 to 1, I'm going to multiply by its reciprocal, by 8/3. And you're like, how does that work? Well, 3/8 multiplied by its flip fraction gives me the same number on the top and the bottom, which gives me in turn 1. So since I multiplied 8/3 on the right side, I have to multiply 8/3 on the left side as well. And if I take 1/8 and multiply by 8/3, that can simplify and I get 1/3 of a mile for my final answer.